Welcome back. I'm still Randy Bueller, still joined by Kevin Crone, as I will be all evening. We're setting up for the second match of our best 3 out of 5 match finals. Rachel has struck first. She is up a match, and it was the matchup that seemed like it was the most in Andreas' favor, so he's definitely got his work cut out for him the rest of the way.
Yeah, and as we said, that match went, one of the ways we expected it could, which is her removal just playing the key role. But I'd like to point out too that she had the coveted turn 1 Deathrite Shaman in 2 out of the 3 games.
2 out of 3.
Yeah. And that really goes a long way to smoothing out her draws. It's interesting that the one game she didn't have that, he had the Revoker. So it's a lineup thing in vintage decks, right? These cards all play different roles in different matchups, and one of the roles in that Eldrazi versus Bug matchup for Revoker is to shut down Deathrite Shaman. Andreas did not get a chance to do that in any of the 3 games.
Now, you talked to the players about their deck lineups, you said, before we got on air tonight. How were they? What did you learn?
Rachel, as we might have anticipated, feels most strong and comfortable with the blue-based deck. She feels these are the best decks in the format. She definitely wanted to have access to her preordains and her monastery mentors, but she wanted a diversity as well. That's why we see the selection she has. She has her blue-white deck, which she's been working on for a while now, which is, her go-to mentor deck in this situation. She's got her rug deck, which she's had success with already in the league, and is basically the same as what she's won with in the playoffs. And then this bug list, right, is designed to attack the format from a slightly different angle and be better in certain matchups.
So all 3 of her decks are blue. All 3 of her decks are Force of Will decks, but there's actually only one mentor between them, and they're all sort of different takes on how you can build a Force of Will deck.
Yeah, precisely. And she wanted to be in a blue-based shell in every case because that's where she's most comfortable, but she also wanted some flexibility when it comes to matches 4 and 5 to be able to position herself differently.
Makes sense.
Andreas, on the other side, basically understood that about her, right? He knows Rachel's predilections, and so he knew that she was likely to probably bring 2, maybe 3 Force of Will decks, right? Yeah. Which is why we see all the Thalias and all the Caverns in his deck selections. Yeah. And there's no surprise there. So there's 2 primary Cavern decks in the format in the form of White Eldrazi and Humans, and he has both of those. And they're both carefully tweaked to be a little less good against shops, a little more good against Xerox and maybe Dredge, because he had a thought that maybe she might try to squeeze a Dredge in there to surprise him. And believe it or not, she said the same thing to me. She said, I really wanted to squeeze a Dredge list in there, but she couldn't find the right one that she liked. So anyway, that's why Andreas landed where he did, because he basically read her for her predilections and then has his go-to PO deck as well.
Yeah, makes sense. So the second match, this is now blue-white for Rachel. So Lavinia, her precious monastery mentor, basically a blue-white, you'd call it a Xerox deck. Most of the Xerox lists we see nowadays have red. This is just a blue-white version of that. But up against 5-color humans, or 4-color humans, I guess he actually has.
And this particular version has 3 Lavinias to really fight the outcome of the Xerox decks and those Scab Clan Berserkers that you mentioned before, which can come down fast thanks to Simeon Spirit Guide. So this is going to be another interesting one, similar to the last, where we see how Andreas's aggressive and threatening draws line up against her removal.
Yeah, if she survives that early game, though, we saw what happened last time. If she draws a couple removal spells, all of a sudden, that aggro deck runs out of gas, right? The Humans deck, I think, is very similar to the Eldrazi deck in that it's hoping to curve out beautifully. And I mean, when it curves out, it's tough for anybody to deal with. But you can get the draw with, too much land, not enough land. You run out of threat, you curve out clunkily, and things can crumble, right? It's not the most consistent vintage deck. All right, players are ready. Let's head down to the action. Rachel's blue-white control has a Swords to Plowshares. Looks like we missed a mulligan, but those 6 look just fine.
Agreed. And Andreas's list, wow, look at that. Now, he doesn't have a Cavern to make a human uncounterable, but Black Lotus Scab Clan Berserker is big game in this matchup.
Wow, yeah. I was going to say, his draw looked like 2/2 mana creatures on the first turn. That's not very good, but turn 1 Scab Clan is actually quite good.
Yeah. Fortunately for Rachel, though, she has the tools to fight this draw, right? Plow plus Force. Jace is a decent backup plan, but she's going to be light on cards in the mid game here, turns 3 and 4, I think. Be really interesting to see what the two of them draw in the interim.
Interesting. She also has to decide which land to play. Like, that Tundra is doing a lot of work in that hand. It's got to be, I mean, it'd be nice to use Tundra swords on the first turn, but he has 0 1-mana creatures in his deck. Like, he only makes a play on turn 1 if he has the Black Lotus, or how many Moxes? He plays 3, maybe 4 Moxes? And he has assuming Spirit Guides.
He has all 5 Moxen in his list.
Okay.
He even has the Emerald despite having no green creatures.
I think she's right to play this Strip Mine, though, because he would have totally wasted Tundra, then done this play, and she'd be in massive trouble. I like Force of Will here.
And I like pitch Jace the Mind Sculptor. Yes, it's a good long-term, late game card for this deck, but she's got Merchant Scroll, which can go get her Ancestral early on. And given the matchup, she knows her Ancestral is going to resolve, basically. So I think this is a good choice for her to pitch. Also, she has 2 Jace in this list, which is not standard given...
Well, that Box Sapphire is pretty exciting.
Yes, it is. Very nice.
How about we both Merchant Scroll for Ancestral and cast it? Assuming we don't get forced to use the plow.
Rachel is also very pleased to see Mana Confluence come down there. I mean, it could have been Cavern for another creature next turn, and still could be.
I think you sit on Ancestral Plow and wait. He doesn't really have a way to punish you.
No, this human's deck really doesn't disrupt spells in hand outside of Kitesail.
Kitesail, yeah. But I mean...
So she is a little bit weak to that right here. But honestly, if Kitesail Freebooter went onto the stack uncounterably right here and now, she would still want to Ancestral and just give up the plow. As it stands, this is exactly the kind of game that favors Rachel strongly now. She has access to Plow, Snap, Plow. She's got more cantrips and card draw. And Andreas has drawn what amounts to the 2 weakest creatures in his deck for this matchup in Containment Priest.
Yeah, this is not the matchup you put Containment Priest in your deck for.
Rachel's playing a little bit of a gambit here by playing Preordain without casting Plow, right? She's opening herself up to a wasteland here. That's fair. This Preordain does not hit another blue-white mana source. Well, I have to believe that was a bottom for her.
Sure? I don't hit both their lands. This Humans deck doesn't play that many lands. Like, we can see that Andreas is sitting on 2 more, but that's not all that typical. I don't hate that,
but you have to believe she was still really looking for another blue-white mana.
I totally think she wanted an island. She wanted to be able to gush as a response to a wasteland. That would have been amazing. Yeah. And now she's lost. She has no mana right now. She's literally... It can't cast a spell until she draws more land at this point. So you're probably right that it was bottom.
The odds of this Provoker going all the way are slim, but Andreas, if he continues to draw mana, well, also he's got 2 Containment Priests to add to the clock here. So
yeah, it's a little bit of a bad beat for her that he's able to cast these Containment Priests after getting double wasted.
Agreed, but there it is. She pulled it off the top. Oh, Kitesail Freebooter.
Interesting. I think he might be interested in a wasteland here.
Freebooter was a pretty good play, or a pretty good draw for Andreas. He has a little bit of a sweat, but
I think you hit the Tundra for this. Like, how many Tundras does she even run?
She has more basics than the average blue-white deck. She is on 4 Tundras.
She's got all 4 Tundras, and she's got 3 basics, but... Right now, she went last turn, she didn't have mana. I like the way Andreas sequenced that.
Also, Andreas just keeps drawing mana sources to go with these creatures. I mean...
Yeah.
It's not like his deck is fully light on mana, but those last few draws really favored him. Wow.
No, you're totally right.
His Cavern into Lavinia, into her Force of Will, which was the worst possible draw.
Yes. This has been an unfortunate sequence for Rachel. Yeah, can't cast the Force of Will while Lavinia's in play. She just has to draw. Wow. And he gets to sit on... I mean, he can play Containment Priest in her end step, which is what he's doing.
When this Freebooter comes down and takes that Plow, I think this game's actually over. Yes, there's a sequence of exact draws that she could pull out of. She could draw Tundra into her 3rd Plow, but it actually seems pretty unlikely. She's going to 9 here and can't cast a single spell in her hand.
Man, what happened?
She can't even cast a Preordain if she draws it.
No. Lavinia, yeah, she doesn't have any lands. Lavinia is turning off everything.
Yeah, this freebooter
crazy.
is
I had Rachel at what 80, 90% at the point where she seemed like she had plow, snap, plow.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, she went for that Preordain.
That's what I'm talking about.
Came up with a wasteland, pulled the trigger on both her wastelands, which didn't seem crazy to me. And now all of a sudden,
there's a general rule in Vintage, and that is even if you have the ability to, you tend to not want to try to be the Mana Disruption player against the Mana Disruption deck. She's got 2 Wastelands in her deck, and going aggro Wastelands against a deck that has 4 Wastelands will frequently result in the situation we've seen here. Now, granted, she could have drawn a land and pulled out of it, but the point is that kind of tactic does not actually play into her deck's strength.
I don't think it changes anything if she doesn't go for the Wastelands, though. It actually, I think she dies faster if he can cast his creatures.
I guess the pivot point there is whether or not she preordained into that Wasteland and kept it on purpose. That's
if she put Wasteland on top, then yes, it was very relevant. If she went bottom, top deck a Wasteland, though, I don't think using them or not using them affected the game. She needed colored mana. Man, he drew so much. He's got, what, 17 lands in his deck? And he drew
like 6 or 7.
5. Well, he drew Black Lotus, and then I think 5 or 6 lands. I think it's 6. 6.
It was 2 Wastelands, 2 undiscovered or 2 unclaimed territory, and a cavern.
Yeah, I think it was 2 Wastelands, 4 or 5 color lands.
Yeah.
Plus the Lotus. That's a lot. All right, sideboarding.
So as we said, this is where she gets to improve a great deal in this matchup. She's got Search the Plowshares number 4 in the sideboard, and she brings in probably Jace the Mind Sculptor. I didn't see all the changes. He probably brings in Jace the Mind Sculptor and Containment Priests. Oh, there it is. The coveted Lotus Mentor. Does it get any better?
Basic Island, too.
It also has Basic Island and Force of Will to go with it. Now, granted, the draw could go a little downhill after that if she doesn't draw more castable spells.
It could. We can see that Andreas' hand is mediocre, though.
His hand is
he's got missteps now.
Well, he has 4 missteps in his sideboard, and he brought, I would guess, most or all of them in.
That's interesting. That makes sense.
It does.
Totally makes sense.
Unfortunately, he could get kind of punished by his choice to do that because misstep in the Thalia deck is not that. It can backfire on you. But here we are. Andreas looks at that turn 1 Mentor and says, oh, no.
That's for sure.
And his draw can't really punish a Mentor here.
Like you say, though, she needs castable spells. Well, Gitaxian Probe. That's a good start. He does not have a Cavern yet. So Mana Drain and Force of Will are currently turned on. Sure. Mental Misstep, the Gitaxian Probe makes a lot of sense. Don't want to let her draw more.
Yep.
We've gotten to the second turn. It's our first 1-mana spell. Doesn't seem like it's worth a Force of Will, though.
I don't think it is.
That's not a Cavern. So
without a Cavern here, which of these 2 creatures do you run out, recognizing that you're walking into potential force?
I mean, I think Thalia is just so much better than the other creatures versus her deck, especially after she misses a land drop, that you have to go for it. Right, you're behind. Your opponent stuck a Mentor. You have to hope they don't have a Force of Will. Like, maybe she can have that draw without a Force of Will and play it exactly the way she played it. So you cross your fingers, you go for Thalia. This is bad news. Interestingly, she pitched the Mana Drain there, not the Snapcaster.
I like that. Yeah. Well, Mystical wasn't a great draw.
No, it's okay, though. Like,
but it's okay.
It's a trigger, right? It's a prowess trigger for the monks, and it's going to go get a 1-mana spell. It's going to put the Ancestral on top. As long as she fades, Strip Mine and Thorn, it's amazing.
She also has to fade other Thalias too. I don't like playing the main phase Mystical there.
Well, she wanted the prowess trigger. It was 3 damage. Like,
Yeah,
he's at 8.
but you're not the aggro deck.
You are this matchup. What are you talking about? You've got 5 power.
Look, the point is, she could still have Mystical right there if she wanted to, but then...
No, it actually adds a turn.
I understood, but she's Mysticaled for an uncastable spell too, right?
And she's going to win the game a turn faster than your line. If she'd only attacked for 3 damage last turn, he wouldn't be dead on the next attack.
He would have been at 6 there. Yep. Well, now we see the kind of draw that Andreas had in game 1 in terms of mana sources backfiring, right? The double Wasteland draw had no utility in that game. And it's obviously unusual because of Lotus Mentor. But what it speaks to, though, is Rachel's mana base. She can, through a combination of fetch land and drawing, build an unwastable mana base in this matchup.
Yep.
And those wastelands can languish a bit in his hand.
All right, this is a big game 3. First match, we saw Andreas take game 1 while Rachel drew some unfortunate mental missteps that he had built his deck to be dead. She came back to take both the sideboarded games. Now here we are in match 2. Andreas took game 1. She got to improve her deck. She took the first sideboarded game. I don't know if I like her odds with these hands, though.
No, this hand of hers is not good. These are the filler cards, right? These are the cards she brought in to replace mental missteps and things.
Yeah, Lavinia on Rachel's side is...
Yeah, Lavinia on her side, I mean, it's in the main deck. But the point is, these are the filler cards in this matchup.
Right, Containment Priest came in from the side, too. They do block, though, right? Like, she trades...
Yeah, they do. And it's interesting. They block actually very well against the creatures Andreas happens to be holding. So if she keeps this draw, it's a little speculative. I don't think it's terrible, but it could actually work out very well for her.
It's a good mix of land and spells. I think you're supposed to keep that draw.
I think you
are. The fact that she's got basic island and the ability to fetch the other basic island. I guess Scalding Tarn can't fetch the one basic plains, so you're sort of reliant on Tundra, but...
Interestingly, also, this hand could facilitate Jace the Mind Sculptor very well.
Yeah.
But you're right. She's going to end up going through a Tundra to do it, and these Wastelands are going to punish that. So it's still a little pretty draw dependent for her. And none of what's going on right here actually removes a Dark Confidant unless she makes Ambush Viper next turn.
That's totally how you play it.
Yeah, which is probably her line.
You totally mid-combat Containment Priest to block with Dark Confidant. Mm-hmm. That is... I mean, maybe you cycle a Time Walk first, but that's absolutely how I play that hand.
She could cycle a Time Walk, and it'd be interesting to see how she fetches when she does, right? Because you could fetch for the island. Oh, you know what? She's going to get the information. If Andreas doesn't play a land right here, it's going to influence her decision. I think that's what he's thinking is, do I not reveal a Wasteland? He doesn't need it, right? He will only need it if he draws another 2-mana creature he can cast next turn and wants to go double threat next turn. So is that better than retaining the mystery? It's really tricky.
You're right. That is what he's thinking about, and there is real value in sandbagging those 2 Wastelands.
Agreed completely. I think it's very reasonable to not play a land here. You can play a threat, and even if she doesn't fetch a wastable land, you can still play another threat next turn. The only thing you're giving up is if you draw a really killer, like a Thalia next turn, you could go Thalia Revoker again. But to be perfectly honest, she hasn't played a Mox yet. These Revokers are of limited utility.
Right.
These are not great cards right here. And he's also probably considering that. It's not a big deal. If you resolve one Revoker right now, it's not that big of a deal to resolve another one next turn.
All right. He decides he wants to make sure he can play 2/2s next turn. Mm-hmm. So he plays the Revoker. What do you name?
Well, you check her deck list and you see... Yeah, you see that the Planeswalkers are only Jaces, so there it is.
Jace the Mind Sculptor. Look at that read.
There's also a minor benefit of saving a point of life.
Fragmentize! Hello, Phyrexian Revoker. You died of Fragmentize.
I actually don't like this main deck fetch, this main phase fetch at all.
I mean, Fragmentize is a sorcery. I think that's her thought. I don't think I like it either. Like, she wanted to get basic planes, but Scalding Tarn can't do that. If that was a flooded strand and you get the basic planes, this is all good.
The Ambush Viper plays off the board now here, though. That's the thing.
Yeah, I think she valued Lavinia more than that. I'm not sure. Oh, you know what? It's actually... Lavinia turns off those mental missteps and defends Fragmentize pretty nicely.
That's a good point. She gets access to the walk. and she can fragmentize and then play Lavinia. I mean, the other way around. This probe is going to get misstepped, which is pretty funny. At the cost of 1 life as opposed to 2.
Yeah.
Thank you, Mana Confluence.
Yeah, and to be fair, Lavinia doesn't actually shut off mental misstep. It just means you have to start paying mana for it.
Yeah.
But yeah, so she set this up. She went for multiple Tundras. That actually does seem like the right way to play those fetch lands. Since you have to worry about Wasteland, you want to keep access to white mana. I think I like it.
Very interesting. She played right into a misstep there, and he didn't play it. He is respecting Swords to Plowshares on Dark Confidant, I believe, more.
Wow. This is the unfortunate part of that her Ambush Viper line, of course.
Yep.
He wastes preemptively before committing Dark Confidant to combat. Oh. If she played the island on the Time Walk turn, oh wow, he's got his two drops? No.
How interesting. He actually drew the exact card I mentioned to set up the double threat this turn, but he wasted on upkeep. He valued wasting on upkeep more. Despite the fact that Rachel has a basic and 2 fetches, she could not set up the resilient mana base she really wanted.
No, she could have the wrong fetch land.
Well, she could have gone island Tundra there and not tried to set up the fragmentize play, right?
Yeah. This Dark Confidant is just running away with the game at this point. Andreas is drawing so many extra cards. And it feels like, oh, if she just finds another white mana, right? She can plow, she can Lavinia. But he's drawing 2 cards a turn. Yeah, if she'd sequenced things differently, she could have had a fetch land in combat. She could have had a chance to ambush Viper with Containment Priest and trade it for Dark Confidant. Mm-hmm. But it was always going to be via Tundra, and she was always going to lose her access to white mana.
That's
like
true.
Her draw just did not give her the ability to get that 1 basic plains out of her deck.
And she didn't know about the second Wasteland, of course. She knew about the first, so she was playing into the first intentionally.
Yeah, figuring, well, I've got the second. I don't hate her line. I just think she could have sequenced it to get a block in. Like she could have had a fetch land untapped instead of a Tundra untapped. Could have been safer. Well, that Mystic Thalia is doing work here. Yeah. No, Andreas has got this.
Lavinia plus Thalia is pretty serious here.
Man, Wasteland's a hell of a Magic card.
Mm-hmm. She even built her mana base to play around it. And
only 2 colors.
She drew 4 white cards this game is really the death knell.
Two, 4, 6. That's half her life total. She is dead next turn, and she can't cast much of anything through Thalia. And if she could, he's got the misstep for it.
So if she drew, she wasn't actually dead on board there. She needed, if she drew basic plains, she could cast Lavinia out of her hand and stay alive. But she has seen enough.
Alive at 1 against 3 creatures.
Yeah, not great.
Yeah, not great. So Andreas ties things up.
Now we get to go into match 3 with a really bombastic, I think, matchup in Paradoxical Outcome versus this Blue-Eyed Pyromancer deck. We're going to see what I would call strength against strength here. We're going to see, their 2 best decks going against matchups where they both know what's coming, right?
Yeah.
And they both have strong interaction from both sides of the table. Rachel's even got 1 Mystic Remora in her sideboard, which is hilarious. How much of her sideboard do you think she's going to bring in? She could bring in 10 cards easily. And all this artifact removal and shattering sprees, more Pyroblasts. She probably doesn't bring it all in.
All right. Well, it's going to be strength versus strength. I think Kevin teed it up nicely. We are going to take a quick break. It is 1 match apiece. So our best 3 out of 5 at this point, basically a best 2 out of 3.
Mm-hmm.
Don't go anywhere. We will be right back with match